The cold clawed like a grizzly that winter solstice night in 1887, sinking fangs into bone-deep marrow across Bitterwind Valley. In the shadow of jagged Rockies, a weathered old rancher stood at her isolated cabin door on Grizzleford Ranch, breath hanging like ghosts in the 25-degree freeze, her silver-streaked braid whipped in the howling wind as piercing eyes locked on the impossible. 100 wolves, amber eyes glowing under the moon, circling her last calf in the corral. They'd come for blood, driven mad by brutal snows that starved the wild. She gripped her grandpappy's scarred Winchester, its walnut stock etched from frontier wars. Behind her, the calf lowed softly, oblivious to the doom closing in. She'd lost the rest of her herd to the blizzard. 5 steers, stiff as icicles. This one was her lifeline, the trade to keep the bank off her spread, the anchor to the land her ancestors bled for. No way she'd let them take it. Boots crunched defiance into the drifts as she stepped out. 6 rounds chambered, 12 more pocketed. Math screamed suicide against a pack, swallowing 3 ranges worth of hunger. But survival against cavalry raids and claim jumpers wasn't won by numbers. A shadow lunged left. 3 wolves, led by a scarred alpha with a muzzle like a canyon split. She fired low, snow exploding at their paws, scattering them into the night. They scattered like smoke from a dying fire, yelping into the moonlit drifts of Bitterwind Valley, but Etta May Lockwood, 90 years etched into her weathered skin like ancient petroglyphs, knew better than to trust the quiet. Her silver-streaked black hair, tied in a loose braid that lashed against her stooped yet wiry frame, caught the wind's bite as she scanned the shadows beyond the split-rail corral at Grizzleford Ranch. Calloused hands, scarred from decades of frontier grit, tightened around the Lockwood family rifle, a scarred, walnut-stocked Winchester repeating rifle, heirloom from her grandpappy's days fending off claim jumpers. Those piercing eyes, fierce and unyielding, narrowed against the relentless howl whipping through the dense pine forests flanking the isolated wooden cabin. The wolves regrouped swiftly, their amber glows multiplying in the evergreen thickets, patient as the granite ridges towering over the frozen plains. Etta May's breath fogged the air, each exhale a defiant puff in the sub-zero grip of that winter solstice night in 1887. The calf inside the corral lowed again, its soft plea cutting through the wind like a knife, reminding her of the stakes. This last survivor of her herd wasn't just livestock, it was the coin to pay the bank, the thread holding her ancestral claim to this land her people had bled for against cavalry blades and endless blizzards. If that chill's already sinking into your bones, smash that like button right now. Let's keep these frontier tales roaring. She pivoted slowly, boots sinking into the deep snowdrifts that blanketed the homestead, her resilient spirit rooted in ancestral pride, fueling every calculated step. The alpha wolf, that scarred beast with a muzzle split like a canyon's maw, locked eyes with her from the tree line, its gaze smart as any Comanche scout she'd known in tales from her grandma. It didn't charge blindly. It waited, testing her rhythm, while the pack, now 17 strong in her count, circled wider, their paws silent on the powder. Etta May whispered an old Apache oath under her breath, not a plea to the spirits, but a claim on this sacred ground. Her defiant voice steady, despite the arthritis clawing at her joints. A low growl rippled from the east, and 5 more shadows detached from the thickets, forcing her to spin with the rifle raised. She squeezed the trigger deliberately low again, the crack echoing off the jagged mountain peaks like thunder in a bottle. Snow erupted in a white plume, spooking the advance, but buying her only moments. The cold betrayed her then, numbing fingers inside her gloves, turning the rifle's weight into lead. Dawn was still 8 hours away, a cruel tease on the horizon, and she could feel her body faltering, the old scars on her hands throbbing like fresh wounds. But Etta May Lockwood hadn't clawed her way through 90 winters of the Old West by folding to the odds. She backed toward the cabin's sturdy door, mind racing through the tools at hand, the trailblazer oil lamp flickering on the porch. Its glass-enclosed kerosene glow a promise of fire, the homestead whiskey flask tucked in her coat, strong spirits ready to burn hot against the night. The pack pressed closer, learning her patterns, their howls harmonizing with the wind's wail across the vast expanse of Bitterwind Valley. Then, from the south, deeper growls joined the fray, reinforcements slinking out of the shadowed wildlife trails, 20 more wolves merging packs in famine's desperate truce. 100 now, real as any frontier legend whispered around campfires. Etta May's heart iced over. This wasn't mere beasts driven by hunger. It was war, primal and unforgiving, testing the last of her line. She dashed inside the cabin, the door slamming shut behind her like a judge's gavel. The warmth of the stove hit her like a slap, pain lancing through her frostbitten fingers as she thawed them for those precious 20 seconds. Grabbing the oil lamp, she hurled it toward the encroaching line. Flames bloomed in the snow, a burst of orange fury that sent the greys yelping back into the drifts. Yanking the whiskey flask free, she poured a hasty trail around the corral's perimeter, the sharp scent cutting through the metallic tang of fear sweat, freezing on her brow. Back out into the fray, she lit the line with a match struck against her boot. Whoosh! The firewall erupted, a blazing no-man's land that crackled and spat against the night. The wolves balked, their advance halted by the heat's roar, but the alpha sat bold on the edge, unmoved, waiting for her to falter as the cold clawed deeper. Drop a comment below. What's the wildest standoff you've heard from the Old West? Etta May charged then, unpredictably, her war cry ripping through the air like a Sioux raid on the wind, raw, guttural, born from the resilient survivor she'd always been. The pack scattered in confusion, the flames dancing shadows across her lined face, highlighting the deep etchings of years outdoors. But the south fence groaned under the assault, wood splintering as a trio of wolves tested the barrier, their fangs snapping at the slats. The calf screamed inside, a high-pitched bellow that twisted her gut. 10 rounds gone now, the Winchester's chamber clicking empty for a reload. Her knee locked from that old arrow wound, a souvenir from a skirmish decades past, sweat freezing into ice armor on her skin. She pressed against the corral, one scarred hand slipping through the slats to calm the trembling hide of the calf. "Not on my watch," she growled, voice low and fierce, unyielding as the Rockies themselves. The pack surged as one, slamming the weakened rails with relentless fury. Rifle barked, east flank first, dropping 2 in sprays of snow, north next, a body tumbling into the fire line with a sizzle, west, where the Alpha's shadow loomed largest, bodies piled at the barrier's base, steaming in the cold, but more poured from the thickets, undeterred by the losses. Etta May fired skyward once, the boom, a psychological thunder to scatter the boldest, then waded into the chaos, clubbing with the rifle's buttstock like a frontier axe. 5 down in the melee, confusion buying her ragged breaths as she danced between flame and fang. That's when Harlan Buck Whitaker, 65 and broad-shouldered, with a grizzled beard framing piercing blue eyes under his weathered hat, limped into the fray from the cabin's side door. He'd been her steadfast partner these last years, stoic and loyal, his dry wit a rare spark in their harsh life on Grizzleford Ranch. That slight limp from an old leg injury, caught in a stampede back in '72, didn't slow him now. Rugged hands gripped a spare shotgun loaded with buckshot, his protective mentor's instinct kicking in like clockwork. "Etta, you stubborn old crow," he muttered, voice gravelly over the din. "Figured you'd hog all the fun." He was deeply connected to this land, to the family legacy they'd built from ashes, and no pack of starved curs would claim it on his watch. Together, they formed a ragged line, Buck's shotgun booming to her rifle's cracks, the air thick with powder smoke and the acrid bite of burning whiskey. The Alpha locked eyes with Etta May across the fire, a mirror of her own grit, survivor forged in hell's own forge, patient as death but hungry for empire. Waves tested them. A feint from the pines forced Buck to pivot, his limp turning a shot into a graze that still sent a wolf tumbling. Another from the valley's frozen plains had Etta May dropping to one knee, firing through the flames to clip a lunging shadow. The cold gnawed deeper, Etta May's breath coming in sharp gasps, her wiry strength pushed to the brink. Harlan covered her reload, his blue eyes scanning the ridgeline where more howls echoed. Stragglers drawn by the scent of blood and battle. "Hold the line, Buck," she rasped, ancestral pride fueling her quick bravery. "This ranch ain't fallin' tonight." He nodded, dry wit flashing in a grim smile. "Wouldn't dream of it, ma'am. Land's got our names carved too deep." The fence buckled further, slats cracking like brittle bones, the calf's eyes wide with terror through the gaps. Etta May poured the last of the whiskey, extending the firewall in a desperate arc, flames leaping higher as wind fanned them into a roaring barrier. Wolves hammered the edges, yelps turning to snarls, but the heat held them at bay. For now. Buck's shotgun clicked empty, and he clubbed back a prowler with the barrel, his broad frame a shield against the press. Minutes stretched like hours, the standoff etching new lines into Etta May's face. She whispered another oath, claiming the ground beneath her boots, while Harlan reloaded with steady hands, his loyalty a quiet anchor in the storm. The Alpha circled closer, skirting the flames, its scarred muzzle foaming with rage. Etta May raised the rifle, sighting true. Crack! The shot grazed its flank, drawing a pained howl that rippled through the pack. But the reinforcements kept coming, shadows merging from the evergreen thickets, the valley's vast plains alive with their ghostly advance. Etta May's fingers, numb and trembling, fumbled around, the cold's betrayal nearly costing her. Harlan lunged to cover, his limp forgotten in the surge, shotgun blasting a hole in the line. "We got this," he grunted, voice steady. "Dawn's comin', just hold." The corral shuddered violently, a section of rail giving way under a coordinated assault. 6 wolves piling against it, fangs bared. The calf bolted in panic, lowing wildly, and Etta May dove through the breach, rifle swinging to guard it. Flames licked at her coat as she fought hand to claw, her defiant spirit unbreaking. Buck fired over her shoulder, dropping 2 more, the pile of fallen beasts growing into a macabre snowbank. Sweat and frost mingled on her brow, Etta May's vision blurring at the edges, but she clubbed and fired, her calculated bravery turning the tide inch by bloody inch. The Alpha leaped then, bold over the embers, aiming for her throat. Etta May met it mid-air with the rifle's stock, the impact jarring her bones like a thunderclap. It yelped back, retreating singed and snarling, the pack's unity fracturing in the chaos. Harlan pulled her up, his grizzled beard crusted with ice. "You're a force, Etta. Ain't nothing taken us." She nodded, fierce eyes meeting his, the bond of survivors forged tighter in the firelight. The wolves milled now, hunger warring with fear, the firewall holding as dawn's first grey teased the peaks. Hit subscribe and ring the bell before the claws hit. Don't miss the showdown. The barrier held, but cracks spiderwebbed the rails. The calf huddled behind Etta May's legs. More howls from the ridgeline. The pack wasn't done, circling for another push. Etta May reloaded with shaking hands, whispering to the calf, her unyielding personality a beacon in the dark. Harlan scanned the valley, shotgun ready, his stoic resolve mirroring hers. A fresh wave crashed against the south, woods splintering louder, flames flickering low on spent whiskey. Etta May hurled the empty flask into their midst, sparks flying, buying seconds. Buck's shot rang out, felling the lead attacker, but a claw raked his coat, drawing blood. "Just a scratch," he barked, dry wit unbroken. The Alpha rallied them, its howl, a command slicing the night. Etta May stood tall, rifle raised, heart pounding with ancestral fire. The pack surged again, a grey tide against the inferno, the standoff reaching fever pitch. Bodies fell, snow stained crimson, the air alive with snarls and booms. Etta May's knee buckled, old wound screaming, but she fired true, 3 down in rapid succession. Harlan covered, his limp slowing him, yet his protective drive pushed him forward. The corral teetered, the calves low, a desperate plea. In that moment, as the fire dimmed and shadows closed, Etta May's voice rose, a war cry echoing off the mountains, defiant to the core. The wolves hesitated, the alpha's gaze wavering, sensing the unbreakable will before them. Final stand: like, comment, subscribe. Share this tale. Spread the Old West fire. The barrier cracked fully, wolves pouring through, but Etta May and Harlan met them head-on, rifle and shotgun a symphony of defiance. Flames reignited from a toppled lamp, the blaze surging anew. The pack broke then, scattering into the drifts as dawn broke golden over the peaks. Exhausted, frostbitten, bloodied, they held. The calf lived. Etta May Lockwood and Harlan Buck Whitaker, guardians of Grizzleford Ranch, claimed victory from the jaws of the frontier, their legacy etched deeper into Bitterwind Valley's frozen heart. Etta May's breath fogged the frigid air as she stepped out from the cabin door, the Lockwood family rifle heavy in her calloused hands. The night gripped Bitterwind Valley like a vice. The winter solstice of 1887, turning the snow into a relentless shroud that muffled all but the low, ominous growls circling the corral. At 90, her body ached from the cold seeping into every scar and joint, but her fierce spirit burned hotter than any hearth. The wolves' amber eyes pierced the darkness, 100 strong, their gaunt forms slinking through the drifts like shadows come alive. They'd stripped the valley bare, famine twisting their instincts into something primal and unforgiving. She scanned the perimeter, the sturdy split-rail fencing of Grizzleford Ranch creaking under the weight of fresh powder. Inside the enclosure, the last calf huddled against the wind, its sides heaving with innocent panic. This wasn't just livestock, it was her tether to the land, the promise that would stave off the bankers circling like vultures from town. Harlan had ridden in just before dusk, his broad frame silhouetted against the storm, shotguns slung over his shoulder. Heard the howls from the ridge, he'd said, his voice a gravelly rumble cutting through the gale. Ain't natural, pack's bigger than last winter. Now he stood beside her at the cabin's edge. Piercing blue eyes narrowed under his weathered hat, the slight limp from his old leg injury making him lean on the porch rail. The alpha separated from the throng, its scarred muzzle lifting in a guttural challenge that echoed off the jagged granite ridges flanking the valley. Larger than the rest, it paced with deliberate menace, testing the air for weakness. Etta May raised the rifle, the scarred walnut stock familiar as her own skin. 6 rounds chambered and ready. She squeezed the trigger low, the crack splitting the night like lightning. Snow erupted at the alpha's paws, sending a trio of wolves scattering into the pines. But they didn't flee. They regrouped, their numbers swelling as distant howls joined the chorus from the evergreen thickets. Harlan chambered a shell in his shotgun, the metallic click a small defiance. "They're learning us already," he muttered, his stoic face etched with lines from decades of ranch work. "Smart as any outlaw I've faced." Etta May nodded, her silver-streaked braid whipping in the wind. She pivoted slowly, boots sinking into the drifts up to her knees. Each step a battle against the numbing cold that clawed at her arthritic fingers even through thick gloves. The pack tightened its circle, probing from the east now, 5 shadows darting forward in a feint. She fired again, the bullet whizzing past a flank, deliberate to herd them back without wasting ammo. The wolves yelped and veered, but the alpha held ground, its gaze locking onto hers with an intelligence that chilled deeper than the mercury-dropping freeze. Minutes stretched into an eternity of suspense, the wind howling through the foothills like a banshee, warning of worse to come. Etta May's mind raced back to tales from her ancestors, whispers of spirits guarding the sacred earth against invaders. This land had seen cavalry charges and claim jumpers, but never a siege like this. The calf lowed softly from the corral, its plea tugging at her resilient core. She couldn't falter. The ranch was all that remained of her legacy, carved from blood and endurance. Harlan shifted beside her, his rugged hands steady on the weapon. "We make a stand here, or they take everything," he said, his dry wit surfacing in the tension. "Reckon I've faced worse than mutts, but these ones got teeth like Comanche steel." A fresh probe came from the north, the pack splitting into smaller groups to divide their attention. Etta May swung the rifle, sighting down the barrel as three wolves lunged at the fence's weak point, a section where rails had warped from years of harsh weather. Her shot rang true this time, dropping the lead attacker in a heap of grey fur and crimson staining the snow. The others backed off, but the alpha answered with a piercing howl that summoned more from the valley's shadowed trails. 20 additional shapes materialized from the thickets, merging with the original group in a truce born of desperation. The encirclement was complete now, a living noose around the ranch. Etta May's heart pounded against her ribs, the cold turning her sweat to ice crystals on her weathered skin. She dashed back toward the cabin, Harlan covering her with a warning blast that scattered the nearest wolves. Inside, the dim glow of the stove offered fleeting warmth, but she had no time to linger. Grabbing the Trailblazer oil lamp from the shelf, she lit it with trembling fingers, the kerosene flame dancing like a fragile ally. "We light 'em up," she growled, her voice laced with unyielding determination. Harlan nodded, pouring from the homestead whiskey flask into a tin bucket, the sharp scent cutting through the musty air. They burst out again, the lamp's light casting long, wavering shadows across the drifts. Etta May hurled the lamp toward the southern flank, where the pack pressed hardest. Glass shattered on impact, flames blooming in a sudden burst that singed fur and elicited panicked yelps. The wolves recoiled, their advance halted by the unexpected fire. Harlan followed with a splash of whiskey along the corral's base, readying a trail for ignition. But the alpha adapted swiftly, skirting the blaze and circling wider, its pack reforming with ruthless efficiency. The cold deepened, the temperature plummeting as midnight passed, sapping strength from man and beast alike. Etta May reloaded, pocketing the spent casings in her coat, each movement a deliberate act of survival. Her stooped posture straightened with sheer will, wiry strength propelling her forward. The pack tested the fire's edge, paws scorching as they nipped closer, hunger overriding caution. From the west, a bold rush, 8 wolves charging as one, slamming into the rails with bone-jarring force. Wood groaned and splintered, the calf's terrified bleat piercing the chaos. Etta May fired into the mass, 2 falling mid-stride, but the momentum carried others through a gap. Harlan's shotgun boomed, pellets shredding the air and felling another, his protective instinct flaring as he limped into position. She clubbed the nearest intruder with the rifle's butt, the impact reverberating up her arms like a hammer on anvil. The wolf crumpled, but its mate snapped at her leg, teeth grazing her boot before she kicked it back. Blood trickled warm against the frieze, a stark reminder of vulnerability. "Stay with me," Harlan called, his voice steady despite the strain, blasting away a pair flanking her. The fire from the lamp flickered low, embers dying in the snow, and the whiskey trail remained unlit. Etta May needed a spark, but the wind threatened to snuff any flame. The alpha seized the moment, leaping over a low drift to lead a renewed assault on the corral's east side. Its jaws parted in a snarl, eyes fixed on the calf, now visible through the fracturing fence. Etta May's breath caught. This was no random hunt. It felt personal, the valley's wild claiming what famine demanded. She poured the whiskey in a hasty line, Harlan striking a match from his pocket. The trail ignited with a whoosh, a wall of orange fury rising between them and the beasts. Flames licked high, illuminating the ranch in hellish light, the heat a brief mercy against the biting cold. The pack howled in frustration, retreating to the tree line, but their numbers held firm, shadows shifting like ghosts in the pine forests. Etame leaned against the cabin wall, chest heaving, the rifle's barrel smoking in the chill. Her fingers throbbed, numbness creeping in despite the gloves, and her old scars burned with phantom pain. Harlan wiped blood from a shallow gash on his arm, earned from a glancing claw. "They're wearing us down," he admitted, his loyal gaze meeting hers. "But we ain't quitting, not on this ground." She straightened, defiant spirit unbowed, whispering words from her heritage to steel her resolve, claims on the earth that no invader could steal. The standoff dragged on, the firewall casting erratic glows across the valley. Wolves paced just beyond, their howls a relentless symphony that echoed off the towering peaks. Etta May's eyes darted to the ridgeline, where more eyes gleamed faintly, stragglers drawn by the commotion, swelling the threat. The corral rails bowed under probing weight, cracks widening like veins in marble. She fired a warning shot skyward, the boom scattering a cluster, but ammo dwindled. Only 4 rounds left in the rifle, Harlan's shotgun down to half. The calf pressed close to the fence, its wide eyes reflecting her own exhaustion. A gust whipped through, weakening the flames, and the alpha advanced once more, sitting brazenly at the fire's edge as if mocking their efforts. Its pack mirrored the patience, waiting for the blaze to falter. Etta May's knee locked from the ancient arrow wound, pain shooting like lightning, forcing her to shift weight. Harlan noticed his mentor's concern flashing briefly. "Lean on me if you need," he said, voice low and reassuring. But she waved him off, calculated bravery driving her to charge forward unpredictably, a guttural cry tearing from her throat. The wolves balked at the sudden fury, confusion rippling through their ranks. Yet the south fence gave way further, wood snapping under assault from a determined subgroup. The calf's scream cut sharp, drawing Etta May's focus. She dashed to reinforce, Harlan laying down cover fire that dropped 3 more. Bullets whined, snarls turned to whimpers, but the pack's hunger fueled endless waves. Etta May's vision tunneled, frost rhyming her lashes, the cold a living enemy sapping her edges. She clubbed another wolf breaching the line, its body thudding into the snow, but exhaustion clawed at her heels. Harlan's limp worsened in the drifts, slowing his reload, a fresh scratch drawing blood across his cheek. The alpha locked eyes with Etta May again, a mirror of survival's harsh forge, both scarred by the frontier's cruelty. But she had the ranch, the legacy. It had only instinct. The fire dimmed as whiskey burned low, shadows inching closer, howls crescendoed from the valley's depths, promising no quarter. Etta May gripped the rifle tighter, her unyielding will a fortress amid the storm, readying for the push that would test every fiber of their grit. The night wore on, tension coiling like a spring, the ranch's fate hanging on the edge of dawn's distant promise. Etta May's breath came in ragged bursts, the rifle heavy in her grip like an old friend's weary arm. The firewall sputtered, its orange tongues licking higher, only to falter against the relentless wind, whipping down from the jagged peaks of Bitterwind Valley. Harlan stood shoulder to shoulder with her, his shotgun cradled low, the metallic tang of gunpowder mingling with the acrid smoke that stung their eyes. The alpha wolf's gaze never wavered, a piercing yellow that cut through the gloom like a knife, urging its pack forward inch by inch. The corral's south rail groaned under the weight of probing paws, splinters flying as teeth gnawed at the wood. She glanced at the calf, its flanks heaving against the fence, steam rising from its nostrils in the sub-zero bite. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about holding the line her ancestors had drawn in blood across these frozen plains. Etta May shifted her stance, ignoring the sharp twinge in her knee, and chambered another round. "They want a fight," she muttered, her voice a gravelly whisper lost in the howl of the gale. Harlan nodded, his grizzled beard crusted with frost, blue eyes narrowing under the brim of his hat. "Then we'll give 'em one to remember." The pack sensed the blaze's weakness, a low growl rippling through their ranks, like thunder rolling over the snowdrifts. Shadows detached from the evergreen thickets, circling wider now, testing the flanks of the ranch. Etta May spotted a trio slipping toward the north side, their forms low and sleek against the white expanse. She raised the rifle, sighting down the scarred barrel, and squeezed the trigger. The crack echoed off the granite ridges, and the lead wolf yelped, tumbling into a drift with a plume of snow. Two more scattered, but the shot only seemed to ignite their fury, drawing a chorus of snarls that vibrated through the ground. Harlan moved with her, his limp forcing a deliberate gait as he pumped the shotgun and fired into the underbrush. Buckshot sprayed, peppering the snow and clipping a flank runner that limped away, whining. But for every one they downed, two more emerged from the valley's depths, drawn by the scent of blood and the promise of easy prey. The air thickened with their musk, a wild, primal stench that clawed at Etta May's senses. She reloaded swiftly, her calloused fingers fumbling only slightly in the cold, drawing from the dwindling pocket of cartridges. 3 left now, each one a precious heartbeat in this endless night. A sudden rush came from the east, 5 wolves bursting from the pines like arrows loosed from a bow. Etta May swung the rifle around, her wiry frame pivoting with the precision of decades spent defending this land. She fired twice, deliberate shots that felled the front pair in mid-leap, their bodies slamming into the corral fence with dull thuds. Harlan backed her up, his shotgun booming to scatter the rest, but one slipped through, jaws snapping at the air mere feet from the calf. Etta May lunged, clubbing the beast with the rifle's buttstock, the impact jarring up her arms as it crumpled. "Stay down," she hissed, kicking snow over its form to mark the toll. The alpha rose then, its scarred muzzle lifting in a silent command. The pack surged as one, a grey tide crashing against the fire's edge. Flames leaped up in protest, singeing fur and eliciting yelps, but the heat was no match for their desperation. Etta May's heart pounded, the ancient scars on her hands throbbing as if reliving old battles. She grabbed the Trailblazer oil lamp from the cabin porch, its glass warm against the chill, and hurled it into the fray. It shattered on impact, kerosene igniting in a whoosh that bloomed like a desert sunrise, engulfing 3 wolves in a blaze of agony. Their howls pierced the night, a cacophony that set the valley echoing, but it bought only moments. The fire spread wildly, threatening to lick at the corral itself. Harlan shouted a warning, pulling her back as embers danced on the wind. "We can't let it take the whole damn place." He snatched the Homestead whiskey flask from his belt, unscrewing the cap with teeth chattering from the cold. Etta May nodded, her defiant spirit flaring brighter than the inferno. Together, they poured the strong spirits in a hasty line along the weakened rail, the liquid soaking into the snow like dark veins. Harlan struck a match from the lamp's remnants, and they touched it off. The whiskey trail erupted in a roaring barrier, taller and fiercer than before, a wall of heat that forced the pack to recoil. Wolves skidded back, fur singed, eyes wide with the shock of man-made fire in their domain. But the alpha was no fool. It flanked wide, leading a subgroup around the blaze's end, aiming for the cabin's shadow. Etta May saw it coming, the beast's cunning mirroring the claim jumpers she'd faced in her youth. She fired her last rifle round into the group, dropping the alpha's second-in-command with a clean hit to the chest. The pack faltered, confusion spreading like ripples on a frozen pond. But the leader pressed on, undeterred, its breath fogging the air as it closed the distance. Harlan's shotgun clicked empty, and he swung it like a club, connecting with a lunging wolf that sailed over the fire line. The impact sent it sprawling, but claws raked his leg, reopening the old wound and drawing fresh blood that steamed on the snow. Etta May's vision blurred for a second, exhaustion weighing on her like the mountains themselves. The corral shuddered violently now, the south rail splintering under a coordinated assault. 10 wolves at once, their bodies piling against the wood in a frenzy. The calf bellowed in terror, rearing against the fence. And a section gave way, with a crack like lightning. 2 beasts slipped through the gap, eyes locked on the vulnerable prize. Time slowed, the winter solstice night of 1887 etching itself into eternity. Etta May charged, her stooped posture straightening in a surge of ancestral fury. She discarded the empty rifle and seized a loose rail from the fence, wielding it like a spear from her people's legends. The first wolf leaped, and she drove the wood home, the force of it cracking bone and sending the animal yelping into retreat. Harlan was there in an instant, despite his limp, grabbing a pitchfork from the cabin wall and thrusting it into the second intruder. It impaled with a sickening crunch, the wolf thrashing before going limp. But more poured through the breach, the pack's hunger overriding fear. Etta May swung wildly, her braid whipping in the wind, silver streaks catching the firelight like comet tails. She connected again and again, each strike fueled by the unyielding pride that had carried her through cavalry raids and blizzards alike. Harlan fought beside her, his protective instincts turning him into a bulwark, dry wit forgotten in the raw grit of the moment. The alpha finally entered the fray, leaping the dying flames with a grace born of survival. It barreled toward Etta May, jaws wide, the canyon-split scar on its muzzle twisting in rage. She met it head-on, the rail splintering against its shoulder, but the wolf's momentum carried it forward, slamming her into the snow. Pain exploded in her side, old ribs protesting, but she rolled, fingers closing around a jagged fence shard. The beast lunged again, and she drove the wood into its flank, twisting with all her calculated bravery. It howled, staggering back, blood staining the white drifts crimson. Harlan roared, tackling the alpha from the side with the pitchfork's handle, the two of them tumbling in a whirlwind of fur and fury. The pack hesitated, their leader's vulnerability rippling through the ranks like a crack in ice. Etta May rose, gasping, and grabbed the fallen rifle, using it to club another encroacher. The firewall surged anew as a gust fed the flames, buying them space. Wolves yelped and retreated from the heat, the alpha snapping at Harlan before limping away, its empire fracturing under the assault. Dawn crept over the ridgeline at last, a pale grey light filtering through the pines, chasing the shadows from Bitterwind Valley. The howls faded into whimpers, the pack dispersing into the thickets, bellies empty and spirits broken. Etta May slumped against the corral, the calf nuzzling her hand through the slats, its warmth a small miracle amid the carnage. Bodies littered the snow, dozens of grey forms stiffening in the cold, a testament to the night's brutal toll. Harlan leaned on the pitchfork, his broad shoulders heaving, blood trickling from gashes, but his piercing eyes alight with quiet triumph. She looked out over Grizzleford Ranch, the isolated cabin standing defiant against the foothills, its wooden walls scarred but unbreached. The deep snow drifts glittered under the emerging sun, the jagged peaks softening in the light. Etta May's breath steadied, the numbness in her fingers receding as warmth returned. "We held," she said simply, her voice carrying the weight of 90 winters. Harlan chuckled hoarsely, wiping sweat and frost from his brow. "Aye, we did. Land still ours." They set to work as the valley awoke, mending the corral with what rails remained, dragging the fallen wolves to the edge of the forest, a warning to any stragglers. The calf lowed contentedly, its survival the anchor that would keep the bank at bay and the ranch thriving. Etta May paused by the stove inside, thawing her hands over the embers, the Lockwood family rifle cleaned and reloaded on the table beside her. Harlan bandaged his wounds, his loyal presence a steady comfort in the quiet aftermath. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the frozen plains, Etta May stepped onto the porch, her wiry strength renewed. The wind had died to a whisper, the evergreens whispering secrets of endurance. She'd claimed another victory from the jaws of the frontier, her resilient spirit unbroken. Rooted deep in the soil her people had defended for generations. Harlan joined her, hat tipped back, and together they watched the horizon, the ranch a beacon in the wild heart of the Old West. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of repair and resolve. Etta May scouted the trails leading into Bitterwind Valley, her boots crunching over fresh powder, ensuring no remnants of the pack lingered near the homestead. The isolation of Grizzleford felt less like a burden now, more like a fortress earned through fire and lead. She mended her gloves by the hearth that evening, the calluses on her hands a map of battles won, while Harlan tended to the calf, murmuring low encouragements that echoed his mentor's wisdom. Word spread through the sparse settlements like wildfire. Tales of the old rancher's stand against the wolves, embellished with each retelling. But Etta May paid it no mind. Her pride lay in the land itself. The sturdy corral, rebuilt stronger, flanked by the dense pines that had witnessed it all. The Trailblazer oil lamp hung refilled on its hook. The homestead whiskey flask, tucked away for future needs, symbols of ingenuity forged in desperation. Winter deepened, but so did their vigilance. Harlan's limp eased with rest, his dry wit returning in jests over stew simmered from preserved stores. "Next time they come callin'," he quipped one night, blue eyes twinkling, "I'll bring the banjo, scare 'em off with a tune." Etta May smiled faintly, her deep-lined face softening, the fierce, unyielding core of her undimmed. By spring's first thaw, the valley bloomed with tentative green, the snow melting into streams that fed the ranch's hidden springs. The calf grew into a sturdy yearling, its coat thick and vital, ready for trade that would secure their hold. Etta May stood at the corral's edge, braid loose in the warming breeze, feeling the earth's pulse beneath her feet. Harlan worked the fields nearby, his broad frame casting a long shadow, the bond between them woven tighter by shared peril. In the quiet moments, as evenings stretched under starlit skies, Etta May would trace the scars on her hands, remembering the Alpha's final gaze, a mirror of her own grit. Two survivors parted by fate. The Old West had tested her to the marrow, but Grizzleford Ranch endured, a legacy etched in snow and fire, unbowed by the wild's cruel hand. Years later, when Etta May's steps slowed further, Harlan still spoke of that solstice night around campfires, his voice carrying the valley's echo. The ranch passed to kin who carried the same defiant spirit, the rifle handed down like a sacred oath. Bitterwind Valley whispered on, its ridges guarding secrets of resilience, where one woman's stand had turned the tide against the endless frontier night. And in the heart of it all, Grizzleford stood eternal, a testament to the unyielding soul of the land. If that rancher's epic stand against the killers got your blood pumping, hit like and subscribe for more heart-pounding ranch stories.